House in Baltimore and Courage Caps hat. It's a crazy, crazy week around here as we got hockey every other night. Obviously watching some NBA, the Orioles and where they are. But they're going to run a little race out at Old Hilltop on Saturday, and this guy is the perfect guest. I'm really looking forward to this chat. I tried to track him down a couple of weeks ago after Lamar Jackson was drafted because he's covered the career of Lamar Jackson in Louisville, and I think I'm pronouncing it right, Louisville, in the Courier Journal, where he covered the Kentucky Derby and Justify and Bob Baffert and all of that good stuff, as well as the entire career of Lamar Jackson down there. So Jake Lourim, you of the Courier Journal there and formerly in Philly, and here in Baltimore and other places, you're a perfect guest for a perfect season around here for a great debate between Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco and whether Justify and Bob Baffert are going to pull this off. Welcome back to Baltimore, man. I hope life is good down there in the Bluegrass State.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it works out well, doesn't it? Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start, I guess, with the race this week. We'll get to Lamar Jackson, which was really the reason I called you a few weeks ago, and we'll back burner that because we do have a little race coming up here this week. Certainly just a hideous weather circumstance, at Churchill 2 weeks ago. And I was down there, maybe 7, 8, 9, whatever year it was, where the sky busted open at 4:50 and the whole place, rained holy hell. We got out of there before it happened. We saw the forecast and we left. So we were watching the slop on TV. It just looked horrific. We were down at Laurel all day, my wife and I. We had, the whole Derby act on and doing the julep thing and all that. But it looked like, boy, this is a good year to skip the Derby. But certainly for Baffert and for a favorite to hold up in those conditions really talks about how special this horse is, right?
Yeah. I think that really struck me too. Because you mentioned the rain? Wasn't there that the situation with Pharaoh at the Preakness 3 years ago when it was beautiful all day and then it just torrentially downpoured for like 15 minutes and the track was sloppy for the race? I seem to remember something like that. To me, what struck me was that it was a circumstance. Everyone was wondering. Justify didn't race as a 2-year-old, winning 3 career races. Can he hold up in this? Can he hold up in that? To me, what it signaled for me was that was an extenuating circumstance that Justify faced and still won pretty comfortably. So to me, the Derby, there's 20 horses, about at least half the horses could have a chance to win if the weather's nice and they run their best race and they get a good trip and they're in the right pole position. To me, what struck me about that race was it was something that some curveball against him and he still was able to come out with the win. So yeah, I think when that starts happening, outside stuff and the favorite still ends up winning, I think people start wondering, okay, this might be something special here.
Well, for a long time, favorites weren't holding up there through all sorts of jostling and whatnot. And, every year I get all gassed up and I put a suit on and a zoot suit, and I love me some Oaks and some Bardstown Road. I'm still pissed about Lynn's Paradise Cafe closing down there, as well as the Phoenix Hill, where I spent many a night with Chris Redman, amongst others, many, many moons ago when I was a younger guy. But, I love the race. I love everything about it. And then the race goes on. I love the pageantry and my old Kentucky home and all that. And the race goes off, and they're like horses taking off from Lexington, over in that side thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's always a little weird. And, I know they want more horses and stuff. And part of the charm of it would be that it's a trouble race for the best horse. It really is. Kind of like the Stanley Cup playoffs. The number one seed never seems to, hold rank through because it's a sloppier field. And I think, and it's so evenly matched in a lot of ways, and the distance and the youth of the horses and all that goes into it. But it really does speak volumes for a guy like Baffert and D. Wayne and any of these guys that can consistently get these horses where they are. I mean, Baffert wasn't even around last year. He checked in from California Preakness week last week with me, and instead he's coming here with the Roses looking for the Black-Eyed Susans. I mean, there's so much luck involved in that part of the game, right?
Yeah, so much. I mean, it's crazy. You look at you see so many people paying so much attention to the post position draw, and you realize that if you might have the fastest horse and you don't get a good trip and you don't win. There is a lot of that. I thought it was crazy leading up to the race a couple weeks ago that I think going into this year, 4 of the last 7 winners came from the auxiliary gate, posts or positions 15 through 20, I think it is. Which seems, I can't imagine.
It's such a longer race, right? It's a longer race by like a significant amount that you have to outrace every other horse to get anywhere near, showing up on the board.
Right. Yeah. And so there's so much that goes into it. And so that's why I think there is so much variability. But at the same time, we have seen a number of favorites in a row win here at the Derby. And so, yeah, just so much. Mendelssohn ended up finishing in last because, and there's the slop too. So you just never know, and that's what makes it fun.
Jake Lourim is our guest. He is with the Louisville Courier Journal down in Louisville, where not only they produce Kentucky Derby winners every year that come here to the Preakness, and we're going to be talking about that all week long, and Justify and Bob Baffert, but also covered Louisville football this year and Lamar Jackson, and we'll get to that in a minute. I just want to stay on the race, and then we're going to go full bore into Lamar because that was the original reason, but I guess serendipity would have it. Any thought for you about being an outsider, a Michigan guy who's been around and writing in this business as someone that I have great admiration because 3 decades ago that was my pathway, was to work at the Baltimore Sun and try to be the columnist somewhere else and do something. That you come into Louisville at this point where football I guess is king, and then there's this incredible race. And for the pageantry of the Derby, I was always a kid because I was from Baltimore, and my dad was never a track guy. My dad never was a pony guy, but the Preakness was always a big deal in our neighborhood. We always watched the Kentucky Derby. It was always one of those things that my mom, my dad, and I gathered on. But then you go down there and you spend a day there, a week there, the hats, the pageantry, the whiskey, all the stuff that happens down there. Brian Baldinger, who's a little bit more dated than I am, and we're great friends, had never been until this year. And he even talked about, wow, it's the greatest thing ever. I feel that way about it. You being down there and covering it, I know it's a little close to the fire, but it is one hell of an event at Kentucky Derby. And if you're a sports fan in America, for me, anybody that asks me, I say go to that event. That's my favorite event.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's everything. It lives up to the billing.
Like Tahiti.
It's so many things strike. I had covered the Preakness a couple of years ago, and I had just a blast. And I thought, well, at some point I got to get to the Derby, and I knew I'd have a long time. I didn't imagine that I'd be there 2 years later. But it's just, it's just such an amazing experience, spectacle, operation, whatever you want to call it. You think about 150,000 people. You watch it on TV, and then you're there, and you're thinking, "Wow, am I really here?" And the other thing about it too is it really is like a week-long festival celebration type thing. I like covering normal sporting events. I like to get there early and watch the stadium kind of fill up. Get there when it's quiet and watch the hype kind of build. And with the Derby, it almost gives you chills. It happens all week. Dude,
I was such a fool, man. I was 27 years old, probably the first time I went with my buddy, and we went down there. We had media passes, but we started Thursday night at Phoenix Hill with the Velcro Pygmies. First thing Friday morning, we're back in the barns with Bo Derek, and Baffert was back there. We were both younger men back then. I'm talking, Silver Bullet Day, 96, 97, 98. Yeah. And I had no idea from the outside what the Oaks was about. And here in Baltimore, you obviously the Pink Festival and Black Eyed Susan, which we have on Fridays, a big deal around here. But the Oaks down there, literally the whole freaking state shuts down, and nobody goes to school, and nobody goes to work. And I don't think that can even be expressed. I've been trying to express it here, but then I send people down there randomly every year. Somebody goes for the first time, and they're like, that's a hell of a thing. I'm sorry I waited so long to go to do that,
Yeah. It's really amazing.
Jake Lourim is our guest. You can find him out on Twitter at Jake Lourim. That's Lourim, as well as at a Courier Journal. One of his stops here in Baltimore briefly as well. And, back to Baltimore and back to Lamar Jackson. And look, man, this is this is the hottest thing going here, right? Like we finally got a quarterback controversy in a first-round pick, and I'm not here to denigrate Lamar Jackson, who seems like a great kid, and his mom was lovely, and his career and all the rushing yards and all that, the accolades, but 31 teams passed on him. He was the fifth best quarterback in a draft that, quite frankly, doesn't have an Andrew Luck or a Peyton Manning or a can't-miss kid in there, certainly not Baker Mayfield, who, or any of these guys, and I'm not ready to anoint him. I'm not ready to kick dirt on a Super Bowl MVP and a guy who's been my favorite athlete to cover here over 33 years of doing this. But, I want to do all the research there is to do on this, and I'm open-minded. I'm going to love watching this kid run around in Canton, Ohio, when Ray Lewis is going into the Hall of Fame in that goofy fifth preseason game we're going to play there. We're running our road trip out there as well. But, I'm trying to get my arms around what the teams that didn't draft him didn't like. And the first thing would probably be the size of his legs and the fact that his legs are going to be a primary weapon in any way you would want to use him, a la Russell Wilson or whomever you'd want to make a comparison to. And those guys are really, really hard to hold up in the National Football League. So I don't know that I'm a believer in that style of quarterback, but I know that you can run around and have a lot of fun and win some games with that kind of quarterback. And I know everyone has been very, very fond of this kid.
Yeah, I mean, with regarding the teams who passed on him, I mean, the biggest thing for me is, everybody said going into it, and everybody knows, if you want to draft him, you have to recommit a significant portion of your offense to him. And obviously there are a lot of teams that just didn't. Nothing against them. It just didn't, or nothing against him too. Just didn't want to do that. If you've got a scheme and you feel like you've got the pieces around you to win with roughly the makeup that you have at this point, maybe you're not interested in taking a guy that would force you to do a lot of different things. Certainly, the Ravens are they go up against. Their style goes up against Lamar's as much as any team in the NFL, in my view. But I think if you're looking at a quarterback and you've got one of those top four guys there, and who I think are all great, by the way, I think they're all going to be starters for a lot of years in the NFL. Why? Maybe you're not willing to take the risk of rededicating everything and trying something new and risking that it doesn't work out if you're sitting there with the first or third or seventh or 10th pick. Maybe I think that's what it comes down to for a lot of teams.
Well, I mean, part of this for me is whatever belief the Ravens have in him, and I look at this as, look, it's 2 number 2s, it's a risk. Sure, you could say they could get another weapon for Joe, but if Lamar Jackson is involved in 8 to 10 touchdowns this year, split out as a wide receiver in some sort of chicanery or some sort of way where you have a set of plays, you could line him up, but he was very, very adamant about not wanting to do that. And I know that a lot of folks frowned on that, and he frowned on some of the interviews he had where they wanted to turn him into Cordell Stewart light. But that probably is going to be his best pathway here, in the same way that when you're taken in the 5th round and you think you're a linebacker or you think you're a safety, what you really are is a special teamer. And I don't know, whether that's going to be the case or not, but certainly Joe Flacco has bristled at what he called a high school offense and a Wildcat a few years ago. I can't imagine that that's changed just from a basic philosophy standpoint, but I don't think Joe Flacco would be unwilling to welcome this incredibly special athlete, that if you get the ball into the kid's hands, that you have options that no one else in the league would have if you use him in that way. And Marty Morningwig's going to get creative. And I think once they all get a huddle and a kumbaya and say, how do we score points on Sunday, you almost need to be able to say, well, whatever you need me to do. Give me a wrench, give me a screwdriver, give me a drill, give me a saw. I'll do whatever we got to do to win on Sunday.
Yeah, I think he's obviously interested in that, but you just from everything that I've experienced, you're just not going to get him to play wide receiver. I mean, he just won't do it. He's adamant about being a quarterback. He will be a backup quarterback. He will learn. He will sit behind Joe and develop. He won't play a position other than quarterback. And I get that that's now the way things are, that's no longer his decision. But the other thing that I feel about the wide receiver stuff is, look, he played 3 years at Louisville. He did not catch one pass. I mean, I get that he's a totally great athlete, and I think he could be good at playing wide receiver in time, but the wide receivers in the NFL are good at catching passes too. It's not like the quarterbacks are quarterbacks and then at wide receiver they just find, great athletes and plug them in there. It's hard position and it takes time to learn. So, I
think some half-pack option stuff. You line him up.
Right,
he's out there. You're not going to get Flacco blown up because I don't think you want him blocking, right? I mean, literally. But if he's out there and the ball gets into his hands and then he can throw it to Flacco or he can throw it anywhere he wants or he can run with it. But how many times are you going to put him on the field in that circumstance?
Exactly.
And the first time something bad happens with the football, that probably wouldn't be a good thing either.
Right.
But for me, the philosophy of the Ravens. And by the way, we got Jake Lourim on the line. Let me just reset everything here. Jake Lourim is a football writer and columnist in Louisville for the Courier Journal. He's been in the Philly Inquirer, USA Today, as well as Baltimore Sun. A Michigan guy doing the mint julep thing down there. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. I got the coffee cup here, always brewed fresh. And on the back, you got the ROFO rewards card. You want to get this card here. Use that when you're doing your gas, when you're getting your fried chicken, your Western fries. You'll get all that free. Also brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, where we present our Be More Positive community and charity series. All of that happens on Thursday, along with Cole Roofing. I'm going to move that around this week a little bit because we got the Alibi Breakfast, but we'll be back after that next week. It's all brought to you by Howard Bank and our friends at Cole Roofing. Jake Lourim can be found at the Courier Journal as well as at Jake Lourim, that's Lourim, out on Twitter. The thing for me with the Ravens, they had the 16th pick. If they felt that this kid was the future of their franchise, they'd have picked him. Then they dealt back to 22. If they felt that at that point, at 22, he was the heir apparent replacement for Joe Flacco, they would have drafted him. Then they dealt back to 25, and they took a tight end. So, I'm not ready to think that anybody in the building is just ready to give the keys to the kingdom to Lamar Jackson, nor was any other team, by the way. So, and look, the Ravens have a special set of circumstances. They had the draft picks. They moved back into the first round. They get him for an extra year. It's sort of a redshirt circumstance where this year becomes sort of a bonus year. So there's all sorts of ways to couch this, but I don't think the franchise has done a great job of doing that. I don't think him and his mom have done a great job of doing that. And I don't know the Flaccos. I don't know that as a media guy who's pretty much on the inside of a lot of things around here, that anybody really has an idea how this is going to work out. Because when I talk to you and say he's not going to line up at wide receiver, and I've been told that, and when Flacco and he aren't communicating in the early part of this, and when Marty Morningway gets on a stage and just gushes all over him on day one, it's a little awkward. I'm not going to lie to you around here. It's a little awkward, and we're all trying to figure out how this is going to work out. But in the end, this is a good kid that you want on your team by every account, right?
Right. Yeah, I think in my view that's the Ravens' philosophy is you're right. You're right. They had the 16th pick. If they viewed him as the future of the franchise, they would have drafted him. They probably would have traded up to draft him for that matter. But
like they did for Flacco. Right?
I think you're right. I think they don't see him that way. But you trade back 22, 25, and you get to 32, and he's still on the board. If you got a Heisman Trophy winner who's a player of his caliber still on the board at 32, I think they think if you have the resource to get him, you've got to take him.
Well, we're not going to get a kid like that next year. And, the whole notion of going 3-13 to get the third pick in the draft, Steve Bisciotti wants no part of that. Literally, neither does Harbaugh or Eric DeCosta at this point. But that whole rebuild thing. Yeah, well, and they're trying to avoid that. And to me, that's what this was about, was how do we never go 4-12, and maybe this kid is our quarterback in 2020 or 21 when Joe is done. Because if they believe Joe was done, they would have worked harder to go get somebody else further up, I think.
Absolutely. And I think the idea with Lamar at 32 is you don't know. Maybe he's not your quarterback. Maybe he is your quarterback. Maybe he's a trade piece. Maybe Flacco's a trade piece. I think their point is they don't know how this turns out. But seeing him on the board at 32 and having the chance to go up and get him, I just think they couldn't pass it up.
Jake Lourim is here from Louisville, where they ran a little race a few weeks ago in the slot. We're hoping for better weather here this weekend, certainly for my wife's hat, which we'll be featuring all weekend long as we head to Old Hilltop and do the racing thing. Your thoughts on Lamar Jackson, the guy, and the transformational part of it? And look, I had Chris Redmond on 2 weeks ago, and then there's Johnny Unitas before that. We've had this weird thing with Louisville and quarterbacks, and you pass that Unitas statue every time you go to cover him, and I guess he passes it as well. Would you have been a guy that bet on him? Do you think that 31 teams made a mistake? I mean, am I going to be calling you back 4 years from now? And the week that we're playing in the Super Bowl in L.A., out there against whomever, right? And Lamar Jackson becomes that it guy, the way Dak Prescott did 2 years ago, the way Deshaun Watson did, the way Tom Brady and Russell Wilson and all those other guys who weren't lottery picks or the number one overall guy.
Right.
Are you ready to throw a dollar on that, having watched him play at that level, and certainly at a very, very high level in a tough conference?
Yeah, I think he's ready. I mean, I think he's, by all accounts, he's a good teammate. I think, like I said, I think at 32, with the resources that they had and the position they were in, he's the guy you want on your football team. I don't think they know what they have out of him yet, but I think he's absolutely a guy you want in your organization. You certainly don't want him. I mean, we can quibble about where you put him, how you see him, where you want to take him, whatever. He's certainly a guy you don't want to see in another organization, especially in the same division or whatever it may be.
Well, I'm thinking you don't want to have to try to tackle him in space. But, when that's the number one thing I can say about a quarterback, that's that's concerning. You know what I mean? Like, if the idea is get him in space with the ball, behind the line of scrimmage where weird things happen in an offense with Joe Flacco, fine. But doing that, 42 times a game and having him run around and, try to run 10, 12, 14 times a game in this league,
right.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, that concerns me when you start putting him on billboards, because I was there the night that Adelis Thomas broke Michael Vick in half in August. I was 50 feet away from that, and it was appalling to me on behalf of the franchise. But that's what you get when you have this sort of weapon, that the game is rough on a quarterback who tries to play that way.
Yeah, I think, and certainly he's not. I mean, he ran a lot in college, especially in his senior year or his junior year.
He had more yards than Saquon Barkley. When I heard that, I'm like, oh my God! I mean, that really speaks to how much he was running the football.
Right, and how consistent he was in doing it, because when the other team has Lamar Jackson, you can key on him, just like you can on Saquon Barkley. So I think he ran a lot. And he's not going to run that much. I don't know. Who can predict injuries? I don't know. He never got hurt in college. He had this mysterious way of positioning his body so that he never really. I mean, I don't even recall a hard hit he took and all the carries that he had.
Well, he's so fast he can beat you to the sidelines, right? Sort of,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And as a quarterback, he can hook slide. I mean, nobody else can do that, right? Literally, right?
Right. Or he's quick enough and agile enough to put his body in a position where it doesn't absorb the hardest. I mean, I actually heard an interesting comment from one source that I can't remember who it was a few weeks ago, that that Lamar runs a lot and takes a lot of hits, and yeah, sure, that's an injury concern, but there's something to be said for actually if you're immobile and you stand in the pocket and you take hits standing still, like a guy like Josh Rosen, that you might actually be more susceptible to injury, or it's at least as much of a concern, because, rather than a lot of hits that you're taking in stride and they just kind of knock you over, when you get sacked, you're standing there and getting drilled. So I think that's a concern too. I mean, who can predict injury? I could easily see Lamar staying healthy and one of the other guys who everybody didn't worry about physically getting hurt. Who knows?
Really appreciate your time and your insights on all things Lamar Jackson. I may reach back to you as a resource into the future, as I'm sure you will be watching what's going on here. And for as long as you're in Louisville, and knock on wood, as long as we're here in Baltimore, we're going to have this race running each and every May. And certainly nothing more exciting than this week to have a Bob Baffert, a potential special horse here coming in, and a pretty good race, pretty good field. Good magic coming in, so that'll be fun. D. Wayne's coming in. We got a Tessio winner here in Diamond King that's going to make some noise, and I'd love to see Bob Baffert get out of here. He's one of my favorite people that I've met in sports in 33 years, quite frankly, and go on to Belmont and make some noise in June. Let's see if we can do this thing all over again. I saw it when I was a lad with Seattle Slew and Secretariat, and all those horses at that time. Aladar as well, and trying to do it, but that was a good era for horse racing. And in order for it to come back, it needs a King, it needs a Michael Jordan, it needs a Tiger Woods. I love when Bob Baffert's that guy, because the horses don't talk.
Right. Yeah, he was certainly the talk of the Derby.
Jake, a pleasure, man. Be well down there in Louisville, and watch the race on Saturday. I'm going to bet on Justify.
All right, will do. All right, thanks a lot, Nestor.
You got it. Jake Lourim joining us here, Louisville football writer at the Courier Journal. You can find him out on Twitter at Jake Lourim. That's Lourim. Great insights there on Lamar Jackson. Luke and I will be covering that. All sorts of things going on around here with horse racing. Obviously, the Capitals. Oh, they gave a thrill over the weekend in Tampa. I'm paying for it with no Bon Jovi and no rest and lots of stuff going on. Shot a video on Monday for King Discount Liquors for our new commercial series in my Free the Birds gear, so you can check that out as well. We're out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault for anything you missed this week. Bob Baffert, Lafitte Pinkai, just everybody in the horse racing world stopping by here at some point this week to give some insights on Bob Baffert and the race out at Old Hilltop. Appreciate the Maryland Jockey Club partnering with us this year for everything Pink and the Black Eyed Susan, as well as the big Preakness Stakes on Saturday with the Bottomless Cup and the great music and the fun, and my wife's hat will be out there at Old Hilltop. Reminder, the morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Always judgment-free at Planet Fitness. And a reminder as well, the entries for Pimlico all week long in the WNST morning newspaper, as well as on the front of WNST.net. Any breaking news? We're all waiting for Manny Machado to get traded. We are not lacking for topicality here, as the grease man would say, in Baltimore on the sports scene right now. So plenty of things that could happen on breaking news. It'll all happen first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coonsford, Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday, back to Thursday this week after a one-day move last week to Friday. The Sunday Sports Voice now heard 3 to 5 on Thursday with Dennis, who provides the Coonsford WNST Tech Service, so we are appreciative of that. I am Nestor. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And a reminder, road trip to Canton, Ohio with Ray Lewis, as well as Charlotte. And I'm running out of seats for Nashville. So if you want to go to Nashville, act on that. It's my 50th birthday weekend. The Ravens play the Titans that day. We're going to the Jack Daniels Distillery. Sure, things will happen there on the first day of the second half of the century that I hope I make it to 100. My mom made it to 98. Why not? I am nasty at WNST.net for any of that cool stuff on the road trips or anything else you need around here. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.